Good afternoon, alien enthusiasts, and welcome to another Angry Alien Bulletin. So once again, 3i Atlas in the news with some new discoveries that have been made, or one discovery in particular that Avi Loeb mentioned in an article that he released yesterday, actually last night, my time in the UK anyway, and then another article that he just released less than an hour ago. New information comes out about this object all the time. And at this point, I think it's a good time for us to review all of the anomalies that 3i Atlas has displayed, including the one that Avi Loeb reported on yesterday, because all of these anomalies combined should convince most people anyway that 3i Atlas, regardless of what it might be, is not a typical comet, is not a comet as we understand it, period. It may look like a comet. It may have some features that resemble cometary behavior, but there are things that it has done that no other comet has ever come close to doing. And all of these things combined make, in my opinion, an irrefutable case that 3i Atlas is something unique, something very different, and something that deserves further investigation. So in the course of this video, first of all, I'm going to briefly review all of the anomalies that we've seen thus far. Number two, we're going to talk about this new discovery from Avi Loeb. And number three, we are going to talk about a comet that Jason Wright, an individual who's been doing his level best, he's at SETI, by the way, an individual who's been doing his level best to try to debunk everything Avi Loeb has been saying. We're going to talk about a natural comet that he uses to compare with 3i Atlas. His claim that this natural comet has displayed characteristics that are very similar to what we see with 3i Atlas, and so therefore 3i Atlas is not a unique object at all, but something that definitely corresponds to a natural comet. So we're going to debunk the debunker and cover a whole lot more in this video, and we're going to get to that right now. Okay, number one, we're going to go ahead and review all of the different anomalies that we have observed with 3i Atlas up to this point. The first 11 before number 12 was reported by Dr. Loeb yesterday, and he did a follow-up on it, by the way, about an hour ago or so prior to me recording this video. So, anomalies 1 through 11, we're going to bring these to you fast and furious. If you want more details on it, I have videos linked at the end of this one that go into more depth. The anomalies that first grabbed my attention were the trajectory and timing of this object. This object has a retrograde trajectory aligned to within 5 degrees of the ecliptic plane of the planets around the sun. This trajectory makes it very easy for this object to pass close to several planets in the solar system, assuming that it arrives at the right time. So first of all, the ecliptic alignment has a likelihood of 0.2%. And then if you talk about the arrival time, this was fine-tuned to bring it within tens of millions of kilometers from Mars, Venus, and Jupiter. 2 planets, by the way, that are within the Goldilocks zone of our sun, and the third planet has moons that might also be harboring life beneath their icy surfaces. A very interesting coincidence with a likelihood of 0.005% if you also include the fact that 3i Atlas achieved perihelion with the sun at a moment that happened to coincide with the object being on exactly the opposite side of the sun from where Earth was located at that time. In other words, at the moment of perihelion, where 3i Atlas changed course, by the way, it was unobservable from Earth. Very, very interesting coincidence, very useful to anybody who, first of all, wanted to intercept multiple planets, perhaps dispatch probes to these planets to explore them, and also to do so and to change course at a moment when they wouldn't be observed by the one planet that they know houses an intelligent civilization. Again, the odds of all of this happening purely by chance are tens of thousands to 1 at least. Now, Now, as far as anomaly number 3 is concerned, during July and August, as well as November of 2025, it displayed a sunward jet, or an anti-tail, that is not an optical illusion from geometric perspective. There are other comets that have displayed anti-tails, but the whole reason that they appear to have them is because of optical illusions. The moment when our planet, from our perspective, passes over their orbital path to where an area that they have already passed and left debris and gas behind appears to be an anti-tail spearing out towards the sun, but it isn't. We are simply seeing where the comet was and where it is now, and from our perspective, it appears that the comet is in the middle of its tail rather than at the end of it. But again, that's just an optical illusion. This anti-tail is not. Now that said, Jason Wright claims that there is one particular comet that is a natural analog for 3I Atlas, a comet that does have a very long and not optical illusion anti-tail, but we're going to talk about that one later on. And I find it very irritating that this comet is being held up as this gold standard of debunking Avi Loeb, because frankly, it's very misleading. Let's go ahead and continue. Number 4. Its nucleus is about 1,000,000 times more massive than OUMUAMUA and 1,000 times more massive than 2I Borisov, and it's moving faster than both, however, with a likelihood of less than 0.1%. Again, if objects this enormous pass through our solar system on a regular basis, then we should be seeing hundreds of objects as small as 2I Borisov or OUMUAMUA, and yet we don't. Number 5, its gas plume contains much more nickel than iron, as found in industrially produced nickel alloys in a nickel to cyanide ratio that is orders of magnitude larger than of all known comets, including 2I Borisov, which is the only confirmed interstellar comet that we have ever seen. Although there are natural theories that support a nickel carbonyl cycle that could have occurred naturally, the only example of the nickel carbonyl cycle that we have seen thus far in real life is an industrial nickel carbonyl cycle that is used to produce nickel-based alloys. Number 6, its gas plume contains only 4% water by mass, a primary constituent of familiar comets. Number 7, it shows extreme negative polarization, unprecedented for all known comets, including 2I Borisov. And by negative polarization, that light curve indicates that its shape is different than all comets that we've ever seen before. It bears a greater resemblance to Centaur asteroid-like objects that exist in the outer solar system. Again, maybe natural, but not cometary. Number 8, it arrived from a direction coincident with the radio WOW signal to within 9 degrees with a likelihood of 0.6%. The WOW signal being the only confirmed powerful narrowband signal that we have ever received that bears at least some resemblance to the sort of thing we would expect from a transmission from an extraterrestrial civilization. Number 9, near perihelion. It brightened faster than any known comet and was bluer than the sun. Number 10, it exhibits sunward and anti-solar jets which require an unreasonably large surface area in order to absorb enough sunlight needed to sublimate enough ice to feed the mass flux of these jets. In other words, the nucleus isn't big enough and the sunlight isn't intense enough to create the anti-solar jets that we're seeing. And we're going to delve into that a little bit more in depth later on. Number 11, near perihelion, it exhibited non-gravitational acceleration, which requires massive evaporation of at least 13% of its mass, whereas preliminary images indicate that the object maintained its integrity and did not break up. And by the way, if I can add something, the NGA displayed by this object was a greater shift in trajectory than any natural comet that's ever been observed, with the possible exception of comets that pass really close to the sun, sun grazers as they are called, and those absorb 1,000 times the heat that 3I Atlas absorbed. All of these things make 3I Atlas a very strange object and very non-comet-like. But now we need to talk about anomaly 12. Okay, so those are anomalies 1 through 11. Let's talk about anomaly 12 now. The anti-tails themselves, as we have seen already, are a remarkable and unique feature of 3I Atlas, something that simply should not be happening with normal, natural chemistry in the face of the solar wind that 3I Atlas is experiencing at the distance that we are seeing these anti-tail jets. So all of that being the case, what have we discovered now about these jets? So last week, preliminary images revealed a network of jets around 3I Atlas, and these observed jets from 3I Atlas should have been smeared by the object's rotation. 3I Atlas is rotating once every 16.16 hours, but instead, the images taken by astronomers F. Niebling and M. Buchner on November 9th, 2025 show tightly collimated jets extending to distances larger than 1 million kilometers at the expected thermal speed of sublimated volatiles from a natural comet at 400 meters per second. It takes about a month for the material to traverse 1 million kilometers. So how could these jets maintain their orientation without disruption if 3I Atlas is rotating every 16.16 hours? The possibility that outflows slowed down the rotation since July, so in other words, it's just rotating slower, is unlikely because asymmetries and outgassing typically enhance rotation. In other words, it should be spinning faster, not slower. There is no recent measurement of the rotation period of 3I Atlas, but we expect related data in the coming weeks. Another possibility is that the illumination by the sun induces outgassing only at specific angles relative to the sun, which are dictated by the orientation of the pockets of ice and the surface topography of the nucleus. For example, ice pockets in deep valleys surrounded by mountains that shadow them will be exposed to direct sunlight and sublimate only when that sun is at the right angle. This would lead to pulsating outflows from that spot with a period of 16.16 hours, resulting in a jet which looks like peas in a pod, separated by a spatial scale of 400 meters per second times 16.16 hours, which is 23,270 kilometers. In other words, we should be seeing 43 peas on a pod of 23,270 kilometers each, and we are not seeing that at all. Instead, we are seeing solid, unbroken jets of collimated gas, or whatever these things are comprised out of. Alternatively, the apparent features might represent the evaporated trail of fragments that were ejected from the main nucleus. This would imply that the nucleus exploded near the sun. However, we have seen no evidence of this whatsoever. And the only possibility that holds up with the observational data that we have seen thus far is that the jets maintain their directionality because they are produced by technological thrusters which preserve global orientation for navigation purposes. And by the way, a fantastic animator, Digital VOODOO, has created this animation that I've been showing you so far in the video that shows 3I Atlas itself rotating, but it has a latticework structure surrounding it which contains the jets, and these do not rotate. They maintain a stable position while the actual object continues to rotate, and the latticework is what houses the thrusters, and these remain oriented in the direction necessary to maintain this object on a steady trajectory. And by the way, ever since this massive NGA event, 3I Atlas has been staying arrow straight on course ever since. And to be clear, no matter what you read or no matter what somebody tells you, we have never seen examples of these sunward-facing collimated jets before. Never. And in just a moment, I'm going to prove it to you. Okay, so now we need to move on to the last, and in my opinion, probably the most annoying feature of this video, and that is the takedown of the debunker. And I'm not going to try to go into every single criticism that this individual, Mr. Jason Wright, has leveled at Avi Loeb, and all of the different things that he said are wrong about his anomalies that he's brought up, and his argument that all of these anomalies can be explained in a variety of examples of other comets that we've seen throughout the solar system. What we're going to do is focus on the anti-tail, the anti-solar jets that we have seen with 3I Atlas. According to Jason Wright, there are examples in nature of something this spectacular occurring with a normal comet. And he brings up one comet in particular. And incidentally, this now lives on in Wikipedia as far as most astronomers are concerned, and as far as mainstream science and mainstream media is concerned. All of this is completely factual. This comet is a real-life example of a natural comet that is behaving almost exactly like 3I Atlas, and I'm going to explain to you why this is absolutely not the case. This is the comet that serves as the keystone for Wright's argument, and I'll quote directly from one of his articles. The morphology of the coma of 3I Atlas is unusual in that it appears to have a prominent anti-tail, or at least a sunward-pointing dust feature, which is not the usual direction for dust tails, which are typically pushed away from the sun by radiation pressure. Such a morphology is certainly unusual given that dust tails are typically directed anti-solar due to radiation pressure, but it is not without precedent among distant active bodies. Notably, Farnham et al. Reported a similar sunward enhancement in Comet C/2014 UN271, which they interpreted as the result of the slow ejection of relatively large dust particles, predominantly from the sunlit hemisphere. The same mechanism is likely at work in 3I Atlas. Asymmetric outgassing from the sunlit side of the nucleus preferentially ejects larger dust grains that are less affected by radiation pressure, leading to a sunward appearing feature in the orbital plane. This is a terrible comparison, and one of the reasons is the size of this immense comet. It's actually the largest comet that has ever been observed in the history of astronomy, meaning that it absorbs far more heat than 3I Atlas possibly can. But in addition to that, as far as the anti-tail, supposed anti-tail that this thing supposedly produced, this object is an immense distance away from the sun. We're talking 16 astronomical units, or further away than the orbit of Saturn. Why does this matter? Well, it's because the solar wind at that distance is like a whisper-thin breeze compared to a hurricane-force gale that 3I Atlas is experiencing at its distance. I mean, we're talking about 16 astronomical units or so, as opposed to 1.4 astronomical units. 4 watts per cubic meter worth of solar wind pressure at the distance that this comet is experiencing, UN271, as opposed to over 1,000 watts per cubic meter, baking the surface of 3I Atlas into these coherent 950,000 kilometer lances that are laughing off these extremely strong solar winds, whereas this other comet, UN271, doesn't have to deal with this kind of solar pressure at all. meaning that if it is ejecting these large particles of dust and ice and such that are extending out into a long anti-solar tail, which, by the way, that's not really what's happening. Instead, it's an extension of this object's coma more so than a tail, but regardless, it's having to overcome a lot less energy. And also, we're not talking about collimated jets here. We're talking about fuzzy jets, not nearly the same thing at all. This UN-271 example feels like motivated reasoning to predict his paradigm rather than a true analog. So why, by the way, have they never done a simulation scaling UN-271's plume to 1.4 astronomical unit conditions? Well, the reason is they would predict that the wind would absolutely shred this comet's anti-tail at that distance. By the way, I decided to do my own simulation of UN-271 at 1.4 astronomical units, and the results, although this was not a 100% accurate simulation, were still very, very intriguing. The wind-adjusted plume, when it's 1.4 astronomical units away from the sun, peaks sharply near the nucleus, about 10 to 100 kilometers away, not hundreds of thousands like Comet Hartley's resolved jets, another example of anti-solar jets that only manage to make it out to about 60 to 80 kilometers, not hundreds of thousands, and then it fuzzes out because of the exponential wind shear from the solar wind, matching UN-271's real halo at this distance, not these million-kilometer lances. In other words, the only thing we're seeing at 1.4 astronomical units is the natural halo surrounding this comet, not any kind of anti-solar jets, because the jets created by UN-271 at this immense distance from the sun get obliterated at 1.4 astronomical units. This is not only an inaccurate comparison, it's an irresponsible one. It's trying to lead uninformed observers to think that the two objects are one and the same, and they just aren't. And by the way, this is not the only example of misleading comparisons that Jason Wright makes. Here's another one. Quote, "One of the most persistent claims about 3I Atlas is that its jets are too collimated and persistent given its 16-hour rotation period, which should cause smearing in large exposures. But as we've seen with other active comets, discrete vents and asymmetric outgassing can produce sharp features even under rotation. A good natural example here is C2017K2, which exhibited highly collimated CO-driven jets extending over 100,000 kilometers at distances of 10 to 15 astronomical units with minimal rotational blurring in Hubble images." Now that sounds very convincing, but here's the problem. The rotational speed for this particular comet is 57 days, not 16 hours, meaning that the same side of the comet is presented to the sun for a very, very long period of time, as opposed to 3I Atlas, which is showing a different side of the object to the sun 3 times every 2 days. This long period of time minimizes rotational smearing in images, even over Hubble's exposure time of hours, because the nucleus barely rotates in this period of time, about 1 to 2 degrees at most, keeping jets aligned and sharp without the blurring you'd expect from a faster tumbler like 3I Atlas, meaning that this is not exactly the best analog for 3I Atlas either. Oh, also, these collimated jets were pointed away from the sun, not at the sun. Frustrating, isn't it? I really have a hard time understanding where these people are coming from and why they continue to slap down the amazing and unique characteristics of this interstellar object that is passing through our solar system. And this is such an amazing and unique opportunity for astronomers to learn something new about an object that isn't behaving like any comet we've ever seen before, about an object that does differ radically radically in so many ways from the types of comets that we have seen within our own solar system. This object, whether it's natural or not, is displaying things that we have never seen in nature in the past. And that is something that should be making everybody excited, regardless of what they think about it. And yeah, perhaps this is some sort of natural object, although I don't know, that's becoming less and less likely to me, given the things about this object's trajectory that definitely seem to be extremely useful for someone that might have sent it here by design. But all of that having been said, the fact that Jason Wright, who knows so much more about astronomy than I do. I mean, that's something that this fellow has been studying forever. And also, he's associated with SETI. He's supposed to be engaged in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. That being the case, then, why slap down these amazing and intriguing theories about this unique object that is passing through our solar system simply because it doesn't adhere to the paradigm that you happen to embrace at the moment? Why be so narrow-minded about all of this? And to be clear, I don't believe that Jason Wright is involved in any kind of conspiracy. I don't think he is intentionally trying to mislead people, but I do think that given the real-life example that we have seen here and just how dissimilar it really is from 3I Atlas, that should be telling us that Jason Wright and people like him, which seems to be 95% or more of the astronomical community, are so deeply embedded in this dominant paradigm that these interstellar objects, when they pass through our solar system, must be natural objects regardless of what they do, that they fail to see the forest for the trees. They have their blinders on and they just won't pay any attention to facts that do not fit into their universal view. And given the fact that the vast majority of media organizations and the vast majority of responsible scientists around the world seem to think that this is the absolute truth of the matter, that there's no reason to discuss this any further, 3I Atlas is definitely not an object that's here by design, so stop talking about it. That, in my opinion, makes us very, very vulnerable to an interstellar object, an alien invader that might actually mean us harm. I don't think 3I Atlas has any nefarious intentions as far as our planet is concerned. If it did, it would have executed an orbital turn around the sun when it had an ideal opportunity at perihelion, and it didn't. But that being the case, it doesn't mean that every interstellar object that follows it is going to be this way. And if we continue to stubbornly insist that these objects must be natural until it's too late, it could lead to a very tragic end to our civilization. An end to our civilization simply because of ignorance and stubbornness. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please consider picking up a piece of merchandise. I'm going to go ahead and show you the hoodie here. In case you haven't seen it before, it is a really cool design and the material is just fantastic. These shirts and hoodies are just so comfortable. Everything about what Sunline makes is really fantastic stuff. If you're interested in supporting the channel, all the details are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, stay angry about space.